Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. The thing I'm really interested in is how do we create organizations that produce better outcomes for both their customers and their people. This podcast has been running since January 2011, and so we have a big archive to explore. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. Before we get into the interview, I'd just like to say that today's episode is sponsored by Qualtrics, ahead of X4 2025, the Experience Management Summit, which is taking place in Salt Lake City on March the 18th to March the 20th. It's set to be an unforgettable event designed to empower you and your organization in leveraging experience management to enhance customer and employee satisfaction, reduce operating costs, and achieve remarkable breakthroughs. There, you will hear about some of the best customer experience programs from industry leaders and companies including Autodesk, Ford, USAA, and Hilton. Find out more and register now at the Qualtrics website. Now, let's get back into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Shafqat Islam, otherwise known as Shaft. And I can call him Shaft because he's been on the podcast before. That was back in December 2023, I think it was. Yep. And that's right, because I looked it up. And so Shaft is the president of Optimizely. We're going to talk about all sorts of things like data personalization and AI and all these other kind of like things, and some studies and research that they've been doing. But first of all, Shaft, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks. Always excited to be back here. I think we had a really fun time last time. My job changed a little bit since I was here last. So people are wondering, what the hell does a president actually do? I thought maybe I'll just clarify. So for us at Optimizely, I'm still wearing the marketing hat. I'm still the CMO, but I have also taken over kind of responsibility for product and engineering. So it's kind of an interesting mix because I get to both build the product and then use the products that we build as customer zero.
Nice. And I mean, I guess you've answered my next kind of question, which is like, tell me a little bit more about kind of you. But you was CMO, now you're kind of president. You've taken on kind of more hats, kind of probably even more busy.
But I think the two hats, by the way, they was intentionally done because the intersection of marketing and technology, which is probably going to be most of what we talk about. We've found just, you cannot have those things so far separated or divorced. We have this incredible feedback loop. If you even think about some of the AI innovation that we have coming out of product, like our marketers are using this stuff every single day. And we are very vocal if it doesn't work, if it doesn't create value, if it's just hype. And so I think just accountability it creates by having all of that in one organization under me, it's been pretty eye-opening.
Oh, no, I can imagine. I mean, I was speaking to somebody recently on the podcast, and they're a technology company, but produce a product in this sort of like space. And they were talking about how their support function is nested in the product team because they need to fuse it together, because actually that you're hearing about everything that's going right and wrong, and
I love that,
all of that sort of stuff. And I just thought, what a great place to sit, right?
I love that. All of this ultimately creates accountability if you're creating real value versus stuff that just sounds good in press releases.
Yeah, no, indeed. Now, one of the things I want to kind of kick off with is because I know that you have produced some new research recently, as a new research report called Tested to Perfection. I like the title of it. And I wanted to ask you, can you tell me a little bit about it and how it came about and some of the main sort of big findings that came out of the report?
Sure. Yeah, I think the title is clever, Tested to Perfection. And it really has focused a little bit more on the testing side of things, because we do a lot at Optimizely, but testing and personalization is a core part of our product portfolio. So, we went out to CX professionals, marketers, and also consumers, did some research. And, on the professional side, so, when we talk to marketers and CX professionals, what we've found is that, 2/3 of marketers in general are using AI within their experimentation approaches, right? So within the testing efforts. Most of them is recent, so half of them adopted it in the last, 1 year. So the rate of change is pretty crazy.
Hmm.
Um, Everyone thinks that experimentation is really important. So no one will, and this may be Captain Obvious. No one's like, oh, should I test or not? Or is A/B testing is important? Like everyone thinks it's important, yet I think it was what, 20% or 30% feel like their current approach is not effective. And so
Okay.
then we started digging into like, why doesn't it work? What are the barriers to actually creating this culture of experimentation? And most of the time, what we found was it's either like lack of resources or time or tools or expertise. So there's all this stuff that's like getting in their way. And maybe this is the last point, why I am excited, where I think the opportunity is 90% of them or 89% of them actually said that they think AI is going to help them overcome some of these
Right.
issues that they face. And I think AI is like a promise that's been there and out there for a while, like, oh, it's going to solve all these problems. But within experimentation specifically and some of these barriers, I really believe that it is going to be a great enabler and solver of these problems. And I can dig into a little bit more
Hmm.
about why. But we have firsthand knowledge even within our company and my team where it's really helped solve some of these problems.
So, I mean, I've talked to people about experimentation in various guises for the last kind of few years right now. In fact, I spoke to there's a Harvard professor called Stefan Tomke,
Tomke, yeah.
who wrote two books,
Experimentation work.
Experimentation Works and Experimentation Matters. And he was talking about how a lot of the times the experimentation is like it's a cultural thing. It's almost like a behavioral sort of thing, which is supported by things and infrastructure and systems and stuff.
100%.
So, what does good experimentation look like? Because it's all very well to say, yeah, we should experiment more, we should do
Yeah,
more A/B testing sort of stuff, or whatever.
yeah.
But actually, what does it really look like? What does good experimentation look like?
Yeah, and you're right. No, there's no leader that's going to say, actually, I would rather be not data driven. Like that doesn't exist. Everyone wants to be more data driven. So what are the actual barriers to becoming great at creating this culture of experimentation? I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah,
So one of the things that I've found is democratizing experimentation beyond just like one or two nerds who sit in the corner who are your like testing people. So to really become good at experimentation, everyone in your marketing or product team should be having a testing mindset all the time.
mm,
And that could be coming up with hypotheses of what you want to test for your web page, for your landing pages, for your content, for your headlines, for even forget about stuff you see on digital. We always test different approaches of like how we organize as a team, um, different workflows that and processes that we put in place. How should we route leads? Like we're always testing stuff and measuring the impact of that, and we'll have hypotheses and we document those hypotheses. So part of it is just making it pervasive across the organization. But then you run into another barrier, which is and this is so common. People are like, Shaf, I don't know what we should be testing. Or like I'm
right,
staring at a blank piece of paper and I'm having a hard time coming up with hypothesis or hypothesis generation is hard. And when Tomke wrote his book, and he talks a lot about that, and there's all sorts of stuff you can do. But those books were written before the advent of AI. And now AI is so well suited to help you with that kind of writer's block or
right.
experimentation block of like, what should I test? Like, we've built AI agents that can actually just do that for you. Like, hey, here's 10 test ideas to run on your homepage
Right.
or on your checkout page. So you're not just staring at it anymore and it's helping you with the ideation. But I think making it a pervasive part of how you operate, to me, that is the number one key to creating a great culture of experimentation.
Absolutely. I mean, does it also not require that? And it goes back, it almost circles back to the point you were touching on before about how teams are integrated or
Yeah.
communicate with each other. So there's no point kind of going, oh, we're going to have some digital marketers over here, and they're going to come up with some hypotheses, and then they have to create a proposal and then send it over to the web team and then or the
Yeah,
product
yeah.
team or whatever. And it's a bit like everything gets caught up in committees, sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. We're very anti-committee at Optimizely, so we would that would never fly. But you're right, it shouldn't be. And listen, there are going to be people who are advocates for experimentation, who are experts, and so lean on those people, but don't make it their problem. To me, it's testing and experimentation is everyone's problem, and it's just like how we build a high-performing marketing team. I'll give you one more example
Mm-hmm.
of testing that's not digital. Because everyone thinks of testing as like, oh, I'm going to test stuff on my site.
Mm-hmm.
We have a field marketing organization, an events organization. We spend tens of millions of dollars a year organizing events. Every single event we do is a test. Like we did this recent thing where we had a personalization event at Nike headquarters where people were like customizing shoes. We had no idea if it would work or not, but we had a hypothesis like, oh, this is a different type of event. Nike's a cool brand.
Sure.
Personalizing your shoe, it ties to the theme of personalization. We think it's going to work. And so we write down these hypotheses. We organize the event. It's an A/B test. We compare it to previous events that were not that. And we can see the lift in terms of both registration, attendance, pipeline, etc. So these are offline tests, but it's just an example of everything is testable.
Yeah.
And that's important.
And I think that's right. I mean, it's also we shouldn't confuse the idea of experimentation with being something that's different or so different and radical to anything else that we would normally have done. It's a bit like people will run campaigns, right? And
Yeah.
they've run campaigns for years
Yeah.
and decades, and some of those campaigns will work better than others.
Exactly.
And there's the learning process, right? You might not have gone, oh, I'm going to do this different campaign. We'll try something different because we learned about that. And try something different. It's sort of the same thing, but not with the different labels.
You're totally right. And when we talk about campaigns or events in marketing, I'm very focused on the ones that didn't work. And I think a lot of people think of those as like the failures, but to me, those are like the learners. That's where
Yeah,
you learn the most, right? So again, creating a culture where you like obsess about, hey, which tests didn't end up working and what did we learn? Because if you don't have learnings and so there's not enough quote unquote like failed tests, that means you're not doing either interesting marketing or good marketing, or you're not measuring something, or you're just making stuff up to make yourself feel better. So
yeah.
there has to be learnings.
Well, I mean, to quote the great Tom Peters, I think I'm paraphrasing him. He said sort of two things. He's like the organizations that learn the most are also the organizations that almost like fail and then learn the most are the ones that tend to win.
100%.
Because it's all about your people, right? And it's about how you build your understanding about kind of what you want to do, and and how best to kind of meet the needs of your customers.
Yeah, we've now this is evolving into like a culture conversation, but I think safety, like giving safety to your team and creating a safe space to be able to share
Mm.
learnings and failures and etc. I think that is really, really important too. So creating a culture of where people feel safe versus, oh my God, if something doesn't work, am I going to lose my job? Like, no, actually, we'll celebrate that.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, and so I think but that whole learning thing. I mean, let's come back to some of the technology kind of parts of it, and the learning kind of bit, and also a little bit of the culture. It's almost like a bit of a three-domain
Mhm.
Venn diagram, as it were. Because I know the research touched on the use of AI and its acceptance and value across kind of marketeers and consumers and things. And I've seen various kind of reports about how people very quickly go hot and then go cold on some of these sort of things. But what are you finding
Yeah.
right now? What's the state of play from Optimizely's perspective?
Yeah. So going back to the research, I think it was 70% thought that AI will make experimentation faster and 62% AI will make experimentation more accurate. So there's a speed element and an accuracy element.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what we've found is that helping get experiments off the ground is the biggest impact we can have. Like the 0 to 1 impact is like people who are just stuck. And then the way we solve this problem using AI is we had a whole team of people on our side. They're basically consultants that they would go look at your website if you're a prospect of ours or a customer, and they would inspect the site or a page or a checkout page or whatever. And they would go through and mark it up and come up with like 6 or 7 different test ideas on your site. And they
Right.
would do this, and they did this for 10 years. And there's thousands of these examples where we mark it up and we send it, and our customers found it very valuable. Now, what we realize is when they're doing this, there's certain patterns or heuristics that they use every single time, right?
Hmm.
And it's essentially best practices or heuristics, like rule sets in their brain where these people can look and common patterns,
Sure.
knowledge of what things are testable versus not, what things never reach statistical significance. So there's basically all these heuristics. And so what we did was we took the last, call it 1,000 of these manual examples, extracted out all the heuristics. We used AI to come up with like what are the rules that they seem to be applying each time.
Hmm.
And we came up with basically it's 25 pages of these rules and heuristics. That was the training set for our agent. And now we have built agents that can, you give it an URL and it can go and do the same thing that the value consulting team was doing. And we obviously back test it by giving it some of the old ones that the human looked at. And the suggestions that the AI comes up with is actually exactly the same.
Okay.
So it's pretty remarkable how fast and how far AI has come. So yes, in the research, people said, I think it can help me move faster and be more accurate. And the answer is it absolutely can. And we've like proven this already, and we're rolling this out for our customers. So we're excited about it. And it's not just about our products. I think it's ultimately AI is going to help kind of enable and democratize testing for everyone, which is the thing that we care about.
And so, but if I come back to the thing that I really care about, which is better outcomes for customers,
Yeah. Okay.
and go back to our original conversation back in 2020, December 2023, and we're talking about personalization and things. I mean, what are you seeing kind of like feeding through from all of that in terms of the ability to leverage
Yeah.
new technologies like AI and this kind of, and the experimentation? I mean, is that driving?
Better outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, ultimately, okay. So then we just take it one step further. So what outcomes are basically what are the test results, right? If people have tested on their site, let's just say silly A/B testing example, they change buttons on their checkout page, right? And this is common. I'm saying it's silly because it's like such low-hanging fruit. There's much more interesting tests
Yes.
you should run. But if you take that example, I mean, I think in any given year, we probably have hundreds of thousands of tests that we're running, millions of test impressions that we're running, and we can see the outcome for all of these tests, right? So not only are we able to use AI to make suggestions on what you should test based on like previous suggestions that humans have made, we also have all the test data and test results so that we can start from the 8 ideas we have, we can immediately eliminate 4 because we know that the outcome wasn't there when, 1,000 of our customers tried that exact test before. So having access to the world's largest repository of test results helps us make our suggestions better because we already can predict the outcomes
Right.
because we have those results, right? So I think that's where, again, the AI stuff, it's just, even 2 years ago, this was not really possible. And it's just how fat the rate of change of what's possible in this industry has been remarkable to me.
And I mean, that's how it comes in terms of how people are responding to some of the things you've been able to change on the website. But in terms of the thing we were talking about before was about, I think the title of the podcast was personalization is pervasive, but not very
Yeah.
personal,
Ah,
or it's
yeah, yeah.
not personal. And that's the thing I wanted to understand. It's like people talk about personalization, but yeah, sometimes it's not very, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's very clunky.
I actually think that hasn't really changed, and I do remember we asked a question about this, and there's still that divide between companies thinking they're doing a great job and
Right.
consumers thinking it's terrible. So that part has not changed.
Okay.
What I am worried about though is AI could actually make it worse, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because there. there's the promise of AI where, okay, now it's going to enable one-to-one personalization. We have products around like what we call it contextual multi-arm bandits. For all the statisticians out there, it's helps you do one-to-one personalization using AI. It essentially serves up the right offer, the right content to the individual using context, using AI. So we have things that could potentially make it work better, but I'm worried that AI will make it worse. And I'll give you kind of the non-technical example of this.
Okay.
Every software company in the world, including us, we have a huge team of SDRs. So SDRs are
Hmm.
like sales development reps, inside sellers. They basically cold email and cold call prospects to try and get meetings, right? Every software company has that. And like every industry has this. They've all suddenly been armed with AI tools to like do research on the prospect and then create an email.
Hmm.
And you can tell, like, pretty much in the last 12 months, everyone has gotten access to like the same types of AI tools. And now I'm starting to get all of these emails, these cold emails that are so clearly written by AI and they're so crappy because you can just tell they're all like following the same formula.
Sure.
It's like, hey, Shafqat, I noticed that you went to UPenn, which is the university. Like, you must have loved XYZ bar on campus. I heard it's a really fun time. Speaking of fun times, are you interested in my product about XYZ? I'm like, this is absolute garbage. And I'm going to hit delete faster than when I did when you wrote it yourself. And it maybe also wasn't great, but, and I know this might sound like a silly example, but I think AI slop is just a huge risk. It's already, we're seeing it. And so there's a chance that it could make personalization worse before it actually makes it better.
Yeah, I think there's an absolute real risk. I mean, it's a bit like if everybody has access to the same sort of tools and the same
Yeah,
general data sets, but then you have this thing that go like, oh, we're all going to use the same sort of things and same sort of approaches, but yet we're all going to expect different results.
yeah,
It's like kind of madness. You're like, no,
it's madness.
it doesn't make sense. And I guess the interesting thing is it seems to me that there's going to be space for an ability to craft or curate some
Yes.
messaging that kind of stands out. The problem is like how do you create signal amongst all the noise?
Yeah. So I think again going back to some basic AI principles, if you're using like an LLM, I don't know, ChatGPT that uses OpenAI or a product that uses Gemini out of the box. If you're using any of those LLMs out of the box, it is madness because you're going to get the same generic stuff that everyone else does. What we've done at Optimizely for our AI products, and it's not meant to be a sales pitch for our products, but I think more the concept, the technical concept to how to solve this problem is that you as a user or a customer of AI, providing context to the AI that's only relevant to you as an individual or a brand as a company is absolutely critical, essential, non-negotiable. And context could mean, like in the case of optimizing, let's say we want to create a better, more customized email that's not be mad.
Mm-hmm.
That means every single piece of information about my current products, my customers, my industry, my ICP, my personas, all my past content I've created, my past product marketing content, everything on my website. Just think if I was to hire a marketer off the street, it would take 6 to 12 months to ramp. After 1 or 2 years of really understanding my business, would the marketing they create be exceptional? So, how do we provide all of that context to our AI, whether it's Opal or the agents that we have? I'm doing that in real time so that when it does go to the LLM and get an answer back, it's totally, totally customized for me and my brand with the uniqueness that is just me.
Yeah.
To that's absolutely critical. So no one should be using these LLMs out of the box. I think it was all gimmicky when when initially generative AI came out and like we put in a question and we got a blog post back and we're like, yeah, this is pretty good. Like, no, that stuff is slop. Like that is AI slop.
But it also kind of includes other things which are you can't control for some of the made up stuff as much as you can.
Oh, the hallucination stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you can when you can adopt a more like a rag like sort of like structure, which is what you're talking about, I
What I'm
think.
talking about is that it is RAG actually.
Yeah.
That it's like how the more context you could provide, the better it grounds, is less hallucination. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons, but that takes work. You got to put in work.
Oh, and indeed, and I think that's the thing. Because I remember actually when it first came out, I was intrigued by ChatGPT, and I asked it, spurred on by somebody else, kind of saying that they'd done the similar sort of thing. I asked ChatGPT to write a bio for myself based on what was out there,
Mhm.
and it was like, oh, these very data points and stuff, and I think, oh, that's fine, 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 fine. And then it decided I was married with 3 kids.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
am married, but I have no children.
got it. So I got 50% of it right. But yeah, no, I think you're
I think it's like that's devaluing the 3 individuals that are supposed to be my kids. I mean, there was some huge embellishments, but then that was there's some very factual kind of like errors, in there. But I think
yeah.
you can control for those sort of things when you, in terms of like your context, what you're doing, your tone of voice, your
Yeah.
approach, all of these types of things.
So this is why my interest in AI has actually moved recently because of all those reasons from the generative side to the agentic side, where it's actually just doing work and kind of taking on tasks and helping me take action. Because I feel like there's less risk of slop, hallucination, made up stuff, like
Yeah.
everyone doing the same thing. And so I think the agentic AI stuff is where there's real opportunity. And we're, even as Optimizely as a company, we're going all in there as well.
Mm-hmm. And so I think the other thing I was going to ask about, because you talked about the personalization, and actually in the short run there's a risk that it might get worse because it's going to get possibly drowned in slop or things. Um, but is there also a danger that it might start to impinge on sort of privacy and stuff as well? Because it's almost as a bit like, I mean, these are advanced tools that are making kind of big kind of guesses and plays and things around sort of things, and it's like what we have seen in the past. We've got seen studies around personalization where customer businesses or brands think they're doing quite well, and customers are like going, "No, you're not," and that was creepy and that was
Yeah,
too
yeah.
much. And I think it's like, is this going to force us to take a more sophisticated look about where the bounds are and how do we temper kind of different personalizations, almost like customized personalization depending on the profiles. I
Yeah.
mean, I think we've talked about this before. It was like, do we get to the point where we actually have to make a decision about the approach that we take? Because I was advocating for being able to ultimately take a one-to-one
Yep.
approach. And then I think you said to me, he says, I'm not sure that's kind of worth the effort.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I said this before because there's different levels of personalization. One to one, there's some downside to it, right? It's like you need a lot of content. Sometimes at that point, the machine is just operating and you have no idea how the machine is operating. So, and then level of effort is high. And I think at that point, this was what, let's say even a year ago, I was advocating for more some middle ground personalization
Right.
by industry or personas, etc. So, um, obviously, AI helps reduce the level of effort required for one-to-one personalization, right? Like now we have products ourselves that we offer to our customers to help you do one-to-one. But I think the question is, okay, just because the level of effort has gone down, is it worth doing? Is it high quality enough?
Mm-hmm.
Is it creepy or not? I
Yeah.
think those questions still remain. I do think if we're dependent on machines, the tailoring of right message to right person will get better than if you were obviously trying to do this even manually through tagging and whatever.
Yeah.
Which would mean, on one hand, yeah, it is actually truly way more personalized. On the other hand, it's going to be more creepy,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and I think there's a fine line. I don't have the answer to it. I do think it's less about, to me, it's not a privacy thing as much as it is like how much personalization is too much And is it going to just be off-putting to the
Sure.
customer?
Yeah.
Like that's a bigger thing.
I mean, I wonder if there'll come a I wonder if there'll come a time where rather than, I know that consumers can actually stipulate the sort of their preferences.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if there'll come a time when consumers can then actually stipulate what a personalized approach would
Yeah.
mean to them, and then companies can act on that.
Yeah. And I think you put the give the power back to the consumer. I think absolutely let them opt in. Now, I think Europe and US also has different human behaviors and tendencies. Like, when I see the button to, do you want to allow cookies for a more personalized experience? I mean, I'm just always just clicking accept all because I'm just trying to get rid of that modal as fast as possible.
Right.
But I think a lot of people don't do that, and a lot of people do look at which cookies am I allowing and how much personalization I'm allowing. So I think humans also have a wide spectrum of what they're comfortable with, and it's hard to know. Like, who is it? Like, my wife turns off all sorts of tracking and cookies. I have everything turned on because I think it'll create a better experience.
Okay.
So it really depends.
And so, I mean, if I just turn back to the kind of the report, just kind of broadly, I mean, what are the sort of do you think are the main lessons that are coming out of the research and the report that you did, and the things that marketeers need to be paying attention to?
Yeah. I mean, to me, the AI hype, is it real or not? I think that is a big question.
Mhm.
And I think if you're a marketer, getting beyond, yes, I need AI. Yes, I'm going to dabble with it. But to see, can it create real ROI for me? And getting to that answer as quickly as possible, to me, that's one of the main takeaways that I have is we're still in a very ambiguous phase of AI where it's gimmicky, people are playing with it, but are we seeing true ROI? Are we generating more revenue, cutting costs, doing more with fewer people? Like those are the things my CFO cares about. If we're not
Sure.
doing those things, then there's no ROI, right?
Hmm.
Everything else is just fun and games. Like it's arts and crafts on the side. So to me, number one is getting to that as fast as possible. Now, I'm bullish on that. I think when it comes to AI agents, so agents doing work on behalf of a human marketer. I think there's two things that are interesting here. I think it allows for almost an infinitely scalable workforce. Uh, I don't think we use those words in the takeaway of the research, but I am optimistic and bullish that agents will allow us to have an infinitely scalable workforce, which is like a pretty scary and crazy concept.
Hmm.
Um, and number two, I think agents will impact marketing more than any other part of the enterprise. Because within marketing, if you just make a list of, what people would say jobs to be done, like what are all the jobs to be done within marketing? Let's say you list out 100 things. There's probably 10 things that are super interesting, creative, requires human intelligence and soul. And then there's probably 80 things that are rote and repetitive.
Hmm.
Um, and I just think there's a massive, massive opportunity for AI to take all that stuff off the plate of humans, replace them with agents, let us focus on the 10 things that we actually are interested and excited by. So to me, all the AI hype, it boils down to that. Like, will agents allow us to take that 80% of rote, repetitive work, take it off our plate so we can focus on the most important things? And that it's going to be a massive reshaping of the workforce, I think.
Are there any sort of like prerequisites or things that people need to put in place? What are the building blocks or the foundational blocks we need to get in place to do that? Because it feels like this stuff doesn't sit in its own vacuum, as it were. You don't have a platform that sits in its own kind of vacuum. There are some fundamental things that I think that need to be in
Yeah.
place in order to
Yes.
kind of facilitate that. And somebody kind of quite pithily said, I read the other day, when data is AI and AI is data. And I
Yeah.
think that, I mean, that is that
Really
the
good.
thing. There's that the thing that they kind of that where they need to start.
Yeah, it's actually a really good statement. Jessica Bergman from Salesforce, she's an exceptional content leader there. She said it at our event and something very similar. Like it's never before been as clear like how important your content is and content governance and having content stored in a central source of truth, well tagged, well governed, because that is the fuel for all of your AI models going forward, right?
Mhm.
If you don't have the content and the context stored in a certain way that's, and governed, you're not going to have great AI. So it goes back to your point, data is AI, is data. So that's a prerequisite for sure. I think also another prerequisite is figuring out where are you going to do all of this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Because I think the last thing marketers need is 10 different tools where you can do little bits of AI stuff in 10 different places and you're constantly swiveling back and forth. I think picking and choosing like what is your operational system where you do the work every day, where you're in it every day, and is that going to be the foundational layer of where whether it's generative AI or agentic AI where that happens? I think kind of figuring out, do you have that tool set? I think that's important. So getting your data foundation right and the content foundation, figuring out the tool where you're going to do a lot of this. And that may, you're going to have to make some hard decisions because every vendor is saying, well, you can do AI stuff in our tool, right? So you got to pick like where's most of the operational work happening. I think those are two prerequisites. I think the other thing is just having some level of knowledge and curiosity and ownership around AI. Like, who on your team is up every day reading about the latest stuff that's happening? This world is changing so fast. Like, you need that level of curiosity and eagerness from
Yeah.
someone or a team of people. And I think that it's hard to replace. You can't just stumble your way through this.
And yeah, and I would say that just be curious the other thing is don't believe everything you read.
Oh, 100%.
Don't swallow don't drink the Kool-Aid. Just be curious and read and research and ask and try to understand. You don't need to be an expert in it, but you can educate yourself enough so that you can ask the most appropriate
Yeah.
questions for your
Yeah.
particular perspective and like, how is this going to help me?
Yeah, what I love about this AI space right now is that almost no one is an expert because unless you've been doing deep AI research for the last decade or two, it's new to everybody. It's
Yeah.
like an equal opportunity, new playing ground. ChatGPT came out November of 2022. It's like crazy. So like if that's the starting point, even if you start learning about AI today, you're not even that far behind. And
Mm-hmm.
assuming you've been using it a little bit, like everyone's in it at the same time. So like there is no such thing as though someone's like a super expert, someone's not. Like anyone can catch up as long as you have the level of curiosity.
And I think the other thing I would say is that there are things that are out there that can that you can play with, that you can experiment with, and it's not just the generative AI platforms. There are other things that you can use. I actually came up with I found one the other day, which I started using for like another project, and it's called Pickaxe Projects.
Interesting. What does it do?
And what it allows you to do, because you can describe a like a say a bot or what you
Mhm.
want it to do. It's to persona and where you want it, what you want
Okay.
it to do, what it doesn't want it to do. You can pick the model, the generative AI kind of engine that you want it to reference, but you can create your own knowledge base. So it's basically your own no code RAG setup
Okay.
that you can just kind of play around with.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. That's like getting hands-on to truly understand what does RAG mean. Okay, well now upload a bunch of files or content or context and
And then you actually start to really learn kind of about it. And I've been sort of playing around with it. It's fascinating. And
yeah.
the thing is, you just have to do the research and go looking for some of this stuff. It's all kind of out there, and you can do it in a ways that doesn't jeopardize sensitive information and everything else. You just kind of, make sure you don't put any of your company kind of information in there, but almost think about running an experiment with another set of information and then seeing kind of what it comes up with. So you end up learning by doing rather than just reading and reading and reading
Yeah.
all the time.
Then we're closing the loop back to the original kind of topics that we talked about. I'm always running little mini experiments in my day-to-day life of as a president or CMO where I'll say, hey, this thing that I do every week I used to summarize like our pipeline activity for the week, results, how we're tracking, et cetera, and just share it with our leadership team. And then recently I said, you know what? Let me just feed in some of the raw data and the charts and have AI generate that same summary. And now, I'm like week 8 of doing that. It takes me 30 seconds versus 30 minutes, right? And it's just like a small experiment to see, like, is my life better or is it worse? Is the output better or is it worse? And some
Sure.
things it works, something it doesn't. So I'm constantly trying new many things to see, like, how do I make my life more productive?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I think that's the thing is that experimentation is a thing to be embraced. And I think that's the kind of point, whether you're a marketeer, whether you work in service, whether you're a writer, whether you're a CMO or a president, all
Yeah.
these different sort of things. If you're an individual and you go, there's some very, very clever and very powerful tools out there. You've just got to figure out what are the right tools that
Yeah.
can help you in the right sort of way.
Yeah. And I think in every domain, you mentioned it's not just marketing. You could
No,
be a creative, you could be a DJ and you make beats, you make 100 beats and maybe one of them is going to be a hit. So
right,
that's
exactly. So stepping back a little bit, anything else that you want to highlight that we've missed out that you go, actually, there's a thing at the report we haven't covered. We should talk about that.
no, I think we basically covered everything. I mean, there's a wide-ranging conversation, but I think we nailed it.
Cool. I mean, I think it's like that. I think for me, the headline or the conclusion or the summary out of it is that things are moving fast. They're changing all the time. You just got to jump in and
Yeah.
experiment and learn.
And future proof your business by remembering some of the foundations, like having a good data and content foundation, having the right tools, have the right culture of experimentation. All of this stuff will future proof your business for this like new AI world that we're entering.
Perfect. So, a couple of quick fire questions before we wrap up. First one is boiling everything down. If I was to ask you a question based around what's your best advice, chef? And I've been asking people to complete the sentence in order to do that. And the
Okay.
sentence is, if you want to improve your customer experience, chef says do this. Dot dot dot. Complete that sentence. How would you complete the sentence?
I'm not going to give a testing related answer because we spent too much time. I will say dot 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 would be memorable, be interesting, be unique.
Awesome.
I found so many B2B companies are so damn boring nowadays that just being
And
memorable, being unique, to me, that's the right way to do it.
I think going back to kind of what we were talking about before, on that answer, is that be memorable, be interesting, be unique, and always defaulting to AI to try and help you get there may not necessarily be the right route. It might
Yeah.
be able to help in that mix, but it might not take you the kind of the last kind of inch that's going to make you memorable and unique and interesting.
Yeah. 100%. Totally agree.
Um, and for a punk question, because it's a Punk CX podcast, what company or brand do you think is inspiring you right now that you think, God, they're punk, they're great, I love them? Who would that be?
That's actually a good question. I recently was um actually there's two that I thought of. One is a company that I would never pay attention to, and I was like, oh, they're kind of interesting. They're coming back. They have witty, crazy messaging. I can't believe I'm about to say this. It's like GoDaddy, which
Okay.
20 years ago, GoDaddy was like, creating those wild Super Bowl ads. And I went on their site recently and someone told me like, oh, their marketing is pretty good and it's clever. I think they're doing some interesting things over there, so maybe worth a check. And then there's another one that's like, you'll never think about this one, which is um, there is a Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. They're a company.
Okay.
I have no interest in Northeast Ohio or sewage, but they have an amazing social media account and website where they are just like really interesting and clever and witty. And someone else in the content marketing space, Ann Handley,
Okay.
pointed this out to me. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is like even the most boring company on the surface can be memorable, interesting, etc. So everyone should go check it out. They do some great work on their social.
Awesome. I love that. Random examples, but you just go like, yeah, there's bits, things that you can learn from all sorts of anywhere and everywhere and everyone.
100%. And this one is really random. So Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, they're gonna start wondering why so many people are coming to follow them.
See a spike in their web traffic. One final question before we wrap up. And I've been doing this for a little bit of a while, over a little while right now. I've been asking people to help me out and tell me a good news story, because the world's a kind of a weird place. And so we're trying to end on a high note and go, so Chef, tell me, what is the thing that you found the most interesting, or the thing you went, oh, that's cool, or that made me smile, or made me feel good, that you've seen, say, in the last week?
In the last week.
Or the last couple of weeks, or whatever.
I'm a sucker for great marketing and great branding. And I think the Nike ads that they ran in the Super Bowl was incredible. I don't know if you saw it, because it's maybe more US centric. But I think that the ad is called So Win.
Okay.
And it has like some amazing women athletes. And you'll see, like, the whole concept is, hey, people are going to doubt you. And if they doubt you, you just do the thing that they're doubting. And so I would encourage everyone to watch it. So go online, Nike, So Win. It brought a smile to my face. Listen, I have young daughters. I love Nike. They're such an inspirational brand to me around just what's possible out there. And I think it'll bring a lot of smiles to people's faces if you go watch. So Nike
Awesome.
Super Bowl So Win is the name of
Well,
the.
I haven't seen that, but I'm totally going to look that up, and I will make sure I include the link to that when I put together the highlights. But I love those. There's sometimes some of the creative and the messaging and the inspiration that goes into some of these ads. They are works of art in many ways.
They are, and this one is.
So, Chef, thank you for coming on the podcast again. That's been great. Thank you for sharing your time and your insight and your experience with me. And yeah, no, thank you. That's it.
I always love these conversations. They are sometimes go into unexplored territories, which is always the fun part for me.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. Do tune in again. Thanks very much.